The president casts a net of uncertainty. Every time he makes one of these wild announcements that people are saying, yay, tariffs to China, tariffs to Mexico, tariffs to Canada, USAID, it's over, it's done. Every time he makes those type of drastic announcements, he affects America's farmers.
Midnight tariff deadline came and went with the White House pushing new levies on dozens of countries around the world.
Yeah, critics say the U.S. economy will take a hit, but President Trump says the new tariffs will make America rich.
President Trump's tariffs on Canada.
Oh, no.
Do you feel like Canada's being treated fairly?
No, I do not.
Canada and the United States, once celebrated as steadfast trade allies, now stand on opposite sides of an escalating tariff war.
We like Canada. I love Canada. I have so many friends in Canada. But they've been very poorly led. They've been very, very poorly led. And all we want is fairness for our country. That's all.
That has shattered years of cooperation and goodwill. What began as a targeted trade dispute has evolved into a full-scale economic conflict, one where industries, consumers, and cross-border trust are all paying the price.
With tariff talks top of mind, South Florida farmers say they're in trouble. Crops are rotting on the vine, and they're blaming the ongoing trade wars.
Trump's aggressive tariff policies, framed as a defense of American industry, have instead spiraled into a cycle of retaliation, eroding the very relationship they were meant to protect. Trump's decision to frame Canada as a trade adversary is baffling to many. For decades, the U.S. enjoyed stable, mutually beneficial arrangements with its northern neighbor.
For border communities, it's sort of like our parents in D.C. and Ottawa are fighting, and we're the ones suffering the consequences.
But the president's fixation on what he calls unfair treatment has poisoned that relationship. His recent claims that Canada imposes 300% tariffs on U.S. dairy have been a rallying cry to his base, but they ignore the reality of negotiated trade rules under the USMCA agreement. These rules allow limited U.S. dairy exports without penalty. The problem arose when U.S. exporters, emboldened by political rhetoric, overshot their quotas.
There is a new flashpoint this morning in Donald Trump's global trade war. That threatened 35% tariff is now in place on some Canadian goods. This is the latest attempt by Washington to tighten cross-border trade. And one Canadian industry that Washington has taken particular issue with is dairy. The dairy industry falls under CUSMA regulations, but U.S. President Donald Trump has repeatedly complained, saying it's an unfair deal for his country's producers.
Canada's response was not impulsive. It was calculated enforcement of the agreement's terms. For 6 months, the two countries have been locked in this standoff.
Industry, businesses, Canadians, they are anxious and they are concerned. They don't deserve the uncertainty that's been thrust upon them. They don't like it. They like resolution. But they'd also like they want the right kind of resolution. They want a deal that makes sense for Canada, that makes sense for Canadian business, for Canadian workers.
Trump's administration has imposed sweeping tariffs across key Canadian exports.
August 1st is going to come, and we will have most of our deals finished, if not all. We haven't really had a lot of luck with Canada. I think Canada could be one where they'll just pay tariffs. Not really a negotiation.
Steel, aluminum, autos, and now dairy, claiming national interest and unfair trade practices. Canada, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, has refused to bow to pressure, responding with targeted countermeasures designed not just to defend its industries, but to demonstrate strategic resolve. The most visible flashpoint, Canada's imposition of a crushing 300% tariff on American dairy products that breach quota limits.
Dairy farmers are watching closely to see what might happen, but they aren't too concerned in terms of these latest trade tensions. Here's what one dairy farmer that co-owns this farm has to say about the current trade talks.
A move that has sent shockwaves through U.S. agriculture. Mark Carney has handled the confrontation with quiet precision. While Trump's rhetoric dominates headlines, Carney has opted for a methodical, almost surgical approach. Rather than engaging in a war of words, he has focused on strategic retaliation, tariffs that hit politically sensitive U.S. industries, while maintaining the appearance of Canada as a rules-based, responsible trading partner. This has been more than just an economic counterpunch. It's a political maneuver that exposes the risks of Trump's erratic trade strategy.
U.S. President Donald Trump intensified his trade war with Canada a day ahead of his August 1st deadline for a tariff agreement. In a Truth Social post late on Wednesday, Trump expressed surprise over Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney.
The fallout is already tangible. Over $3 billion in U.S. dairy shipments have been rejected at the Canadian border, with hundreds of containers of cheese, butter, and milk turned back. Much of this inventory, near expiration or previously rejected by other markets, is now flooding the U.S. domestic market at deep discounts. At first glance, consumers see lower prices on grocery shelves, but the reality is bleaker. These are surplus goods dumped at fire sale prices, with quality and freshness in question. Farmers in states like Wisconsin, long the backbone of American dairy, are facing unprecedented losses. Milk is being dumped, processing plants are operating below capacity, and farms are closing at alarming rates. Industry groups like the National Milk Producers Federation warn of billions in losses, calling for emergency intervention. Yet the White House remains largely silent, offering no clear relief plan or path forward. The administration's gamble, that tough talk and tariff pressure would force Canada into concessions, has instead left American producers exposed, without meaningful market access and with no domestic safety net. The political consequences are mounting as well. Canada, once willing to negotiate in good faith, now appears content to play a long game. Carney has made clear that any deal will not suffice. Quality matters more than speed. This patience stands in sharp contrast to Trump's self-imposed deadlines and public ultimatums, which have come and gone without resolution. Every missed deadline undermines Washington's credibility and strengthens Ottawa's position. What's more, Trump's hardline approach is alienating not just Canada, but other trade partners. The European Union, Japan, and Australia are all reconsidering their import policies on U.S. dairy, wary of being drawn into similar disputes. The risk is no longer just bilateral tension, it's broader isolation from global markets. Canada, meanwhile, has positioned itself as a reliable alternative supplier, strengthening its trade ties elsewhere even as relations with the U.S. deteriorate. The human cost of this standoff is being felt on both sides of the border. In the US, farmers are struggling to keep their operations afloat, small-town economies are contracting, and consumers are unknowingly buying products that are the byproduct of a collapsed export strategy. In Canada, industries dependent on US markets face uncertainty, though government support and diversified trade are softening the blow. What's clear is that the spirit of partnership that once defined US-Canada trade is now fractured, replaced by suspicion and tit-for-tat reprisals. Mark Carney's role in this drama is particularly noteworthy. A seasoned economist and central banker, he has approached the tariff conflict with a strategist's mindset. His countermeasures are precise, designed to maximize pressure without escalating recklessly. By targeting politically sensitive goods and emphasizing Canada's adherence to trade agreements, Carney has both defended his country's interests and cast Canada as the responsible actor in the eyes of international observers. In contrast, Trump's approach has been reactive, driven more by domestic politics than long-term economic stability. As the self-imposed deadline for a new agreement passes without resolution, the prospects for a quick deal appear slim. Canadian negotiators, backed by Carney, are in no rush to concede. They know that time is not necessarily on Washington's side. American farmers and manufacturers are feeling the strain, and political pressure is mounting within the US to ease tensions. In Canada, the prevailing sentiment is that a rushed, unfavorable deal would be worse than no deal at all. Meanwhile, the broader economic damage continues to spread. Tariffs on steel, aluminum, and autos are hitting both countries' industries. Cross-border supply chains, finely tuned over decades, are being disrupted. Investment decisions are on hold as businesses wait for clarity. And consumers, both Canadian and American, are paying more for goods caught in the crossfire. The irony is that this tariff war, pitched as a fight to protect American workers, may end up costing them the most. Without a clear resolution, industries on both sides will continue to absorb losses, jobs will be at risk, and trust between two of the world's closest economic partners will erode further. Canada's strategic countermeasures, guided by Carney, show no sign of relenting. Trump's approach, fixated on headline victories, has yet to deliver any tangible benefits. In the end, what's at stake is more than just dairy quotas or tariff percentages. It's the stability of a relationship that has underpinned North American prosperity for generations. The longer the conflict drags on, the more damage is done, not just to trade flows, but to the political and cultural bonds that tie the two nations together. For now, Canada is standing firm. The US is reeling from self-inflicted wounds, and the world is watching to see if either side has the political political will to step back from the brink. If Washington fails to adjust course, this could be remembered as the moment when a short-sighted tariff war permanently altered the trajectory of US-Canada relations. And in that scenario, it will not be the politicians who bear the brunt of the fallout, but the farmers, workers, and consumers who depend on the stability that once defined this partnership.